Hello Lexi, Hoodie, Sew Along Gang, and welcome to week 1. So this week is basically the foundation week. So this week is all about making sure that firstly you have your pattern. So make sure that you have purchased that. If you've bought a download, that you've printed off your templates and got those all attached together or had them printed in large format. Perhaps give it a read over. Make sure that you're very familiar with the steps. I always like to read over first. It just lets you know what's coming, get familiar with it. Also this week we're wanting to finalise our fabric choices, or you may be needing to buy them all. If so, I'm going to go through a quick little section first up, just talking about a few different ways you can play with contrast. So the pattern does mention high and low volume fabrics, but you don't have to be using high and low volume fabrics. There are other ways to make your contrast. And then we're going to make sure we get those fabrics all washed, all pressed, and get into cutting out our pieces. So watch along, and I hope you're all excited about starting week 1 and getting stuck into it. So here I am just with a few little tips when it comes to selecting your fabric. Now, if you're wanting to make your hoodie much like my cover photo, then for that I have used high volume and low volume fabrics. High volume fabrics are like these ones here, and the reason that they are used is because they grab attention. You're going to see the star. The star is going to be the dominant part of your hoodie. Now, high volume fabrics are highly saturated, like you can see with all of these, and they don't have a lot of white or neutral space. They might have a couple of little tiny spots of white or neutral, but the majority of them are saturated colour. Now, they don't have to be brights like this. They could be more muted shades. They could be earthy tones. They could be jewel tones. They could be anything. The main thing is that they're attention grabbers. Okay. Now, your low volumes are exactly the opposite, counterbalance of that. So they are generally soft, light, neutral. They don't have to be fully neutral. Like you can see, this one here is actually a pink fabric, but it's a real pale, soft pink. This one also has got a pink background with some quite vibrant colours on it, but still the dominant thing is for them to sit in the background. They're soft, they're light in compared to these. So white, neutral space next to highly saturated colour with hardly any white or neutral space. And I think you can't go wrong. All right. So another option is to do the same sort of thing, but instead of working with low volume, working with greys or blacks or something like that, okay? So these don't necessarily go together. They're just the greys I could find. So if we use the same star fabrics, you can see how even though these have got a lot of colour and not a lot of white space, so it goes against the rule I said before, the colour isn't saturated. Like greys do not have colour saturation. So they contrast beautifully in the exact same way. So if you're not confident with picking the whites, creams, the light colours, or you just don't like such a light coloured hoodie, then maybe think about going to greys. You could also go to blacks, and it doesn't even have to be brights like this. It could be softer colours, but that just because they're saturated colours, they really pop against the grey. So this is a nice soft peachy tone, but you'll see how, you know, next to grey, it's going to pop. Another idea is to work with solids. So this is a really good idea, a real foolproof idea for anyone who's hesitant. So I've only got a few here, but again, I'm just working with what I have. So these solids here are beautiful and vibrant, and you could go with some beautiful vibrant solids for your star fabrics, and then use other fabrics that can be as bright, as vibrant. But the point of contrast is that this is a busy pattern compared to a solid. So these are the exact same colors almost that we have here. So you would think this blue and this blue, oh, they're very similar. They shouldn't contrast, but have a look at how much contrast we have just because this is a busy print and this is a solid. So that's another way you can work with it, and you could do it either way. Your busy prints could be your star and your solids could be your background, or vice versa. Again, it doesn't have to be as bright as this. This is just what I had as a good example on me because it had the same colours in it. You could be soft with this. You could be pastels. You could be beautiful soft pastel solids and beautiful soft pastel busy prints. It doesn't matter. It's not about the colours we're using here. It's about the contrast being in the busyness of the print next to the solids. Next is choose a colour you love. For instance, I love pink. Okay, so when you're choosing your star or high volume fabrics, pick them to be all pink. And when I say all pink, I'm talking about fabrics that are dominantly pink like these are. So the main space is pink. There's not a lot else going on. You've got other colours. You've got blues, oranges, reds, different shades of pink, some beige and cream. You've got other bits going on, but the pink is dominant. Now, I also like blues. So what I'm going to do is for all of my other fabric, for all of my other 15 or 16 fat quarters, I'm going to pick blue fabrics that have a touch of pink in it. So it's tying that pink in, it's nodding to the pink, which is my theme, but they're all blue. So I've just got a few here, and what I'm going to just show you is that grab those fabrics. So you've got your star fabrics already, they're locked in. Then when you're shopping or going through your stash, find blue fabrics. This is kind of a petrol-y grey blue, but I feel it fits in, that have touches of pink. So this one here's got touches of pink. So it fits in, but it contrasts heavily. So have your main star fabrics and then put one of your background fabrics on top of it and check that it contrasts with every fabric. So I know now this is a perfect fabric to pick for my 15 to 16 fat quarters. Now I'm going to start trying to pick fabrics that fit in with this, but also still have high contrast with this. So again, looking at blues, I want to keep going with blues. So I have this blue here, which again has little touches of pink, and it contrasts beautifully with all of those. So great, I'm going to add that to my mix. Now I don't want them all to be dark, dark blues. I want there to be all different shades of blues in my mix. So again, I've got another fabric here, touches of pink with a lot of blues and greens and tones there. Again, contrasts well with every fabric. Great, it's going in my mix. Then I've got this one. Now this one is a little bit borderline. Okay, so this one is blue with some green in it, but little touches of pink. Now I still feel like it contrasts well with everything. It's not a major contrast, but it's enough. And within the mix, it's still going to lean more towards this pile of fabrics, still leaning more towards the blue, and it's giving me differing shades within my blues, and it is still contrasting with the pink, but matching in with the pink. And just one last one here that I had in my stash as well, again going to a slightly paler blue. This one here has got the ever so tiny sweet little touches of pink in there. Again, contrasts enough with everything, okay? And that's going to my mix. Now I don't have more to give you an example here, but I put these ones together because I like these together. I like these 5 fabrics together. They've all got that nod of pink, and they're all going to contrast beautifully with those pink fabrics. So it's just about building it from there. You can't go wrong. Don't forget it's patchwork, all right? So as long as there's contrast, you can't get it wrong. It's patchwork. It's meant to be scrappy. It's meant to be bits and pieces together. So have fun with it. And actually, I wanted to quickly talk about the fabrics I'm using because they're quite different yet again and go against almost every rule that I've said here. So the fabrics that I'm using, which I've shared with you all a few times, is the Tilda Songbird collection. Now, these are what's going to be the background of my hoodie, and these blues and greens are going to be the star. So this is from the same fabric collection, and we have the same prints. So there's definitely no high volume, low volume happening here. In fact, they're very similar. They're similar in tone, they're similar in saturation, they're similar in pattern. So they've got a lot similar going on. The only difference is my colours. And I'm doing this because I love this fabric and I want to make my hoodie out of it, but also because I want to experiment with how much contrast I can achieve with just the difference being the color. So I know it's going to be soft. I know it's going to be pretty. I know it's not going to have anywhere near the same contrast that I have in, for instance, my cover shot, but I still think there's enough there, and I think I'm going to really enjoy that soft contrast. Also, even if you're working with your hoodie and you find like you're not getting a lot of contrast, we can create more contrast later on with the quilting. So anyway, I hope all of those ideas have helped a little bit. I hope you're feeling more confident to pick your fabrics. Follow your gut. Make sure there's some point of contrast that is reflected throughout your two different groups of fabric. And yeah, just go with it, back yourself. So have fun picking your fabrics, guys. So before we start working on our Lexi hoodie, the first thing that we want to do is make sure we are all over our sizing. So open up your template page and you'll see the measurement charts like I have here. Now it is mentioned here that I recommend that you use the body measurements and not refer to the finished garment measurements, because we need that extra space within the garment, especially with a quilted item which has got no stretch and no give within it. So measure your body measurements, your bust, your waist and your hips, and then look at this chart and see what you fit within. Now, usually as a guide between your bust and waist, I would use whatever is the largest measurement and go by that. So for instance, my bust is my largest measurement between my bust and waist, and it's 103 centimeters. Therefore, I am going to make the extra large. Even if my waist measured 100 centimeters, that would be fine because a hoodie is straight down. So that's why I'm saying to base it upon your largest measurement. Now, don't worry if this is saying you are a larger size than you would buy at the stores. There's a lot of difference between sizing from country to country, but also generally sewing pattern sizes were developed in the 50s and 60s and are quite outdated when it comes to women's bodies. So just use the measurements as a guide, and the sizing is what you need to make, even if it is different to what you buy at the store. So go ahead and do that. Make sure you know which size you are making, because that will give a basis for how many pieces you need to cut and how we're going to lay out our pieces. So it is the first thing we need to know. So I really want to go to the first step, which is a very important step, and that is to grab all of your fabric pieces that you have purchased. We're going to get all of these pieces, we're going to open them up, and we are going to put them in our washing machine. Now look, this is a really crucial step. Basically, because it's a wearable, we are going to be washing this item regularly. So we want to make sure that we get rid of any shrink from these fabrics, especially if you're using fabrics from different collections together, or different thicknesses, or maybe yarn dyed fabrics with some quilter's cotton. You really want to make sure that you have washed everything before we're cutting our pieces, so that you know once you've spent all those hours making your beautiful hoodie that you will be able to wash it. You're not going to have problems with it not fitting later, or even worse, have problems with some fabrics shrinking more than others and that kind of distorting your patchwork piecing. Now, if you are using flannel as your batting, I recommend you also wash your flannel. You also need to wash your lining fabric. So please make sure you don't miss this step. Okay, so I've got all of my fabric in the washing machine. Now, some of you may wonder what setting to put it on. Look, that is just as simple as putting it on whichever setting you intend to use when you wash your hoodie. So just do that, set it through the normal cycle with the normal products that you would use. And once that's all washed, we'll look at ironing and getting everything cut. So I've just finished washing my fabrics, and I did put mine in the dryer. So I realized that I hadn't mentioned that when I was talking to you all about washing the fabrics. I didn't talk about whether you put them in the dryer or you hang them up. Look, it's totally personal preference. So I put mine in the dryer. I didn't put it to maximum dryness. I just put it so that it would dry up to level 2 out of 4 levels, just to get rid of some of the moisture. I decided to put it through the dryer because I just wanted to make sure that it had all of the shrink out of it. I've just got some water spray here, and also if I need it, I've got some Best Press, just if I need it. But usually I just, because I'm using just a little travel iron here, just a couple of little spritzes of water can help that a little bit. Now, obviously you don't have to be too precious, but you want it to get to a stage where you can cut them nicely. So I'm just going to continue on here, and I'm going to iron all of my fabrics, make sure they're all nice and flat and ready for cutting. The next step in getting prepared for making our sweatshirt or hoodie is to cut out our fabrics. So this is a job that I recommend you have a little bit of time aside for. I always think that it's something to spend a lot of time on, is the cutting, as accuracy at this point really does change your whole experience going forward. So I'm actually working on what in the pattern is considered the high volume fabrics first. So they're the fabrics that are going to become our stars. So I'm just starting to cut those out. Now for the stars, for the high volume fabrics, what we need from each one is we need 2 squares that measure 3 inches, and we need 4 squares that measure 3 3/8 by 3 3/8. So I'm using my ruler here rather than my board for measuring out. And I'm going to cut out my 3 3/8 inch pieces. I think from each one of these that I have here, I should get 2 3 3/8 inch squares and 1 3-inch square. So I'll just check that out once I've trimmed off all my frayed sections, because when you do pre-wash your fabrics, you do obviously lose a tiny bit to the stretch, but you also lose a little bit to the fraying ends there. So that's just something to bear in mind. So out of that one, I have gotten 2 3 3/8 squares, and I'm also going to get 1 of my 3-inch squares from that as well. Now I swapped out for a fresh blade. If you have any bluntness in your blade, I recommend doing that before you start cutting out all of your fabrics. It will make your job a whole lot easier and a lot more accurate. It's one of those things that we leave off until it's really necessary, but I think when you're making any sort of patchwork, it's a really good idea just to make sure you've got a sharp blade to work with. So there, we've done it for that fabric. I'm just going to continue on here cutting my high volume fabrics. Okay, so I've just finished cutting all of my high volume squares, and in my case that's my blue and green squares. Now if you're into labeling your fabrics as you go, then these ones are going to be your star centers, so you can label them as your star centers, and these ones are going to be made into the half square triangles for your star points, so you can label those as star points. So I'm going to pop those away now. They're all done and ready to go. And next what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my low volume fabrics. So in my case, that is my yellows and oranges. There's also a little touch of pink in there. Now this fabric we're going to be using a whole lot more of. In fact, we're going to be basically using all of this fabric. I suggest before we cut all of the 3-inch squares, you go ahead and cut one section that is going to be your 3 3/8. So look, I'm just on mine going to cut one section from the side like this, because I know I can get my 2 3 3/8, and then I can still get 1 3-inch square from the top of that. So I now have my 2 3 3/8 squares. Now for my sweatshirt, because I am making the extra large size for myself, I need to make 28 of each fabric 3-inch squares. So already I've got one there. Now I can go ahead and work in the width of my fabric to start doing my 3-inch squares. So I'm going to trim off my ends, and now I'm going to cut into 3-inch squares. Now I know with each one of these I'm getting 6 squares because I've got 6 layers there, and I need 28. $24. Now I know I need another 4 more. I already have one there, but I might just make an extra one. Sometimes when you're piecing all these bits later, you may have preference for some fabrics over others as you're piecing them. So I always recommend have more rather than less. So I know I have cut more than I require there with that pile, and that's fine. The more the merrier. And I now have these little bits left over, and I'm going to keep a hold of those. They may come in handy later on if I decide that I need a few more squares of this. So I'm going to continue on to do that with all of my 15 low volume fabrics. If you have more or less on the pattern, it does tell you that you need a total of X number of squares for your size. Then just divide the total squares that you need by the amount of fabrics you have, and you'll have an idea of how many you need to cut. So I'm going to continue on with this and come back when they're all done. Okay, so that's me all cut out now. I've got all of my pieces. In fact, I think I've got a whole lot more than I need, but I like to have more than I need in case I want to change around some of the fabrics and have more of one or less of the other, depending on how things are looking, just to get a nice pleasing finish. So I've cut all my pieces. So we have here, these are star centers, these and these are going to be the half square triangles. So they are all the 3 3/8 by 3 3/8. And then these ones over here are going to be all the rest of the background of all of your pieces of your sweatshirt. So feel free to label those if you want to. Just make sure you definitely don't get mixed up your 3 3/8 with your 3-inch squares so that we won't have any problems later on. That is it for this week. I think we are all finished up, which is really exciting. It's such a relief when it's all done. And it's done, it's ready, and we're all on track to start sewing next week, which is super, super exciting. So I think I've probably left you with enough to think about for this week. So get stuck into all of those things, and next week we'll get stuck into doing some sewing, which is really, really exciting. So see you then, bye.